My name is Naomi Carter, and while my husband sat across from me demanding half of my home, he had no idea I already knew the truth. Caleb had secretly moved $68,500 from our marriage, rented an apartment for my best friend, and signed the lease months before asking me for a divorce. But that was only the beginning. The woman I once gave a home was helping him replace me. My own family wanted me to forgive him, and the career I had helped him build was hiding a violation that could destroy everything. Caleb thought I was still the wife who would protect him. So when he pushed the settlement toward me and told me to sign, I looked him in the eyes and asked one question that made his confidence disappear. Had he really disclosed every account, every transfer, and every secret he believed I would never find? The first thing I noticed in the conference room was how comfortable my husband looked. Caleb Warren sat across from me in a charcoal suit, one hand resting beside a leather folder as if he had already won. His attorney, Martin Hale, arranged the papers between us with the careful confidence of a man who believed the difficult part was over. Beside me sat my attorney, Daniel Reeves. He had warned me before we entered the room that Caleb would try to make the settlement sound reasonable. He would use words like fair, clean, and respectful. He would talk about closure as if closure were something he had the authority to grant me. Outside the windows, downtown Portland disappeared behind a curtain of January rain. Across the street, in a coffee shop with fogged windows, my former best friend was waiting for Caleb. Rachel Monroe believed I did not know she was there. Caleb believed the same thing. That was the first mistake they made that morning. Martin slid the settlement proposal toward me. Caleb is hoping we can resolve this without unnecessary conflict, he said. The terms are balanced. Both parties retain their personal accounts, and the marital assets are divided equally. I looked down at the document. The language was polished. The intentions underneath it were not. The proposal included the townhome in Lake Oswego, valued at approximately $840,000. The home Caleb had begun calling ours only after he decided he wanted half of it. I had purchased it 12 years earlier, using money my grandmother left me. The deed had always been in my name. The mortgage payments had come from an account I kept separate from our household finances. Caleb had lived there with me. But living inside something did not automatically make it yours. He leaned forward slightly. We built a life in that house. Naomi, 15 years. You cannot act like I was just a guest. His voice was calm, almost gentle. That tone had once made me feel safe. Now I understood it for what it was. Caleb sounded most reasonable when he wanted something unreasonable. I kept my eyes on the agreement. The proposal also stated that each of us would remain responsible for any personal expenses incurred after our informal separation. That sentence was meant to bury the money he had already moved. He did not know how much I knew. I did not know everything yet, but I knew enough to keep my hands away from the signature line. Daniel folded his hands on the table. Before my client considers these terms, we need confirmation that all financial disclosures are complete. Martin glanced at Caleb. Caleb did not hesitate. They are complete, Daniel continued. That includes all bank accounts, credit accounts, rental agreements, loans, transfers, and outstanding financial obligations. Yes, Caleb said. He looked directly at me when he answered. For a moment, I wondered whether he had practiced that expression in the mirror. Calm eyes, relaxed mouth, a hint of disappointment, as if he were the wounded one, and I was forcing him through something unpleasant. I had seen that expression many times during our marriage. He used it when he forgot an anniversary and told me I cared too much about dates. He used it when he missed dinner with my mother and said work pressure was something I would understand if I were more supportive. He used it when I asked why Rachel knew details about our arguments that I had never shared with her. Every time, he made my questions sound like accusations and his answers sound like patience. Caleb leaned back. I do not understand why we are making this harder than it needs to be. We both know the marriage has been over for a long time. I lifted my eyes. Do we? His jaw tightened. You were never home. You cared more about your job than you did about us. Rachel listened when I needed someone. There it was. Not an apology. Not even an admission. Just a new version of the story where his betrayal had been caused by my ambition. I had spent 15 years helping Caleb become the man now sitting across from me. I had rewritten presentations at midnight while he slept. I had used vacation days when his father had surgery. I had carried our health insurance during the years when his consulting work was unstable. I had stayed quiet when he accepted praise for ideas we had developed together at our kitchen table. But the moment I stopped absorbing the cost of his choices, I became cold. I almost laughed. Instead, I looked at the rain sliding down the windows. A memory came without warning. 3 months earlier, I had returned home before noon because a client meeting had been canceled. Rachel's car was parked 2 houses down, partly hidden beneath a maple tree. I remembered opening the front door and hearing voices upstairs. Caleb had said my name. Rachel had laughed. I climbed the stairs slowly, still telling myself there had to be an explanation. There was not. I found them in our bedroom. Caleb had stepped toward me as if he could physically block what I had already seen. Rachel had pulled the sheet over herself and started crying. Not because she had hurt me, because she had been caught. I came back to the conference room when Daniel touched the edge of my legal pad. Caleb was still watching me. Maybe he expected tears. Maybe he expected anger. Maybe he thought I would ask whether he loved her. I had asked myself that question every night for weeks. By the time I sat across from him, I understood that the answer no longer mattered. I placed my hand on the settlement agreement. Caleb's shoulders relaxed. He thought I was reaching for the pen. Instead, I asked him one question. Are you certain every number in your financial disclosure is accurate? Caleb glanced at Martin, then back at me. Yes. Every account? Yes. Every transfer? His eyes narrowed. I already answered the question. I nodded. Then I pushed the agreement back across the table. I am not signing this. The room became very still. Caleb stared at me. Martin cleared his throat. Daniel remained silent. Caleb looked at the unsigned page as if the paper itself had betrayed him. Why not? Because we have not completed financial discovery. His face changed. It was small at first, a twitch near his mouth, a tightening around his eyes. Then the calm expression disappeared. Discovery, he said. For what? For the finances? We were married for 15 years. You know, our finances. That is exactly why I need discovery. Martin placed a hand on Caleb's arm, but Caleb pulled away. This is ridiculous. You are dragging this out because you are angry about Rachel. I looked at him. I am angry about Rachel. The honesty seemed to surprise him. I continued before he could respond. But anger is not why I am refusing to sign. I am refusing because you are asking me to certify numbers that have not been verified. Caleb turned toward Daniel. Is she accusing me of hiding money? Daniel answered evenly. My client is requesting the documentation she is entitled to review before signing a final property settlement. Caleb looked back at me. You always do this. You turn everything into an investigation. I held his gaze. Only when the answers keep changing. Martin ended the meeting shortly after that. He said both sides would exchange formal requests for financial records. He said there was no reason the process had to become hostile. Caleb said nothing as he gathered his papers. When he stood, he leaned close enough that only I could hear him. "You are going to regret making this ugly." I did not move. I did not raise my voice. I simply said, "I am not the one who made it ugly." He walked out without looking back. Daniel waited until the door closed. "You handled that well." My hands were trembling beneath the table. I folded them together. I did not feel like I handled anything well. Daniel gave me a moment before speaking again. "You can review any joint account that carries your name. You can provide statements you already receive legally. What you cannot do is access Caleb's private email, phone, or individual accounts without authorization." I nodded. I had no intention of breaking into anything. I had spent years working in corporate risk management. I knew that evidence collected the wrong way could become a weapon against the person who found it. Daniel continued, "I want to bring in a forensic accountant. Her name is Michelle Park. She can analyze the joint records and identify what additional documents we should request through discovery. Do it." He studied me. "Are you sure?" I looked at the unsigned agreement. "Yes." We left the office together and stepped beneath the awning outside the building. The rain had softened to a cold mist. Across the street, Caleb entered the coffee shop. Rachel stood before he reached the table. She took his hand with both of hers. He bent toward her and said something I could not hear. She smiled. For one painful second, I remembered the woman who had slept in my guest room after her divorce. The woman who had cried against my shoulder and promised she would never forget what I had done for her. I wanted to cross the street. I wanted to ask her why. I wanted to hear an answer that could make 15 years of friendship and marriage fit into something I could understand, but I stayed where I was. Rachel lifted her coffee cup. Caleb glanced toward the legal office behind me, then turned away. They were celebrating. They thought the agreement was finished. They thought I was still the woman who would absorb the damage, sign the papers, and disappear quietly so they could begin their new life without inconvenience. Daniel opened his umbrella. "Michelle can start with the joint statements this week," he said. I watched Caleb sit beside Rachel instead of across from her. Then I nodded. "Tell her to start." My marriage was over. The truth was only beginning. Michelle Park began with the records I was legally entitled to see: joint checking, joint savings, shared credit cards, tax returns, credit reports carrying both our names, statements that had been arriving in my email for years, documents I had barely opened because Caleb had always told me he was handling the household finances. Daniel made the boundaries clear before Michelle reviewed a single page. "Do not access Caleb's private accounts," he told me. "Do not guess passwords. Do not open his personal mail. If something belongs only to him, we request it through discovery." I understood. My career had taught me that the strongest evidence could become useless when someone obtained it the wrong way. I was not going to give Caleb a reason to turn his dishonesty into a complaint about mine. I uploaded the records to Michelle's secure portal on a Thursday evening. By Friday morning, she had sent me a short message confirming receipt. She did not promise an answer. She promised a process that mattered more. While she followed the numbers, I found myself following the memories. Not all 15 years at once. That would have been too much. Our marriage had not failed in one dramatic moment. It had been worn down by small permissions, quiet compromises, and the belief that love meant never keeping score. The first memory that returned was from 2015. Caleb was still a senior account strategist then, talented enough to be noticed, but not disciplined enough to make senior leadership trust him. His company was preparing a proposal for a major regional healthcare network. And Caleb had been chosen to present the implementation plan. 3 nights before the presentation, I found him at our dining table surrounded by printed slides. He rubbed both hands over his face when I walked in. "This is a disaster," he said. I set my bag on the chair. "That bad?" "They want a risk framework, a transition strategy, and a 90-day deployment plan." My team gave me 42 slides of product features. I looked at the pages spread across the table. "That is not a strategy." "Thank you," he said. "That is extremely helpful." I smiled and pulled out the chair beside him. "Show me what they actually asked for." We worked until nearly 2 in the morning. I reorganized the presentation around operational risk instead of sales claims. I told Caleb to stop promising a flawless rollout and explain how the team would respond when something went wrong. He resisted at first. "Executives do not want to hear about failure," he said. "Executives assume failure is possible." I replied. "They want to know whether you have thought further ahead than the person selling against you." I rewrote the opening. I cut half the slides. I helped him build a simple decision table showing which problems required escalation and which could be handled by the local team. At midnight, he pushed back from the table and stared at the new structure. "How do you make this look obvious?" "It is not obvious," I said. "That is why it took 4 hours." He laughed and kissed my forehead. "What would I do without you?" At the time, I thought it was affection. Years later, I would understand that some people ask that question as a compliment, while quietly assuming they will never have to find out. Caleb delivered the presentation on Monday. The client awarded his company the contract. 2 months later, he was promoted into management. His family held a celebration dinner at a steakhouse in Beaverton. His mother, Lorraine, raised her glass. "To Caleb," she said. "You have worked for this your entire career." Everyone applauded. Caleb smiled and thanked his manager, his team, and his father for teaching him persistence. Under the table, his hand rested on my knee. He leaned toward me while his brother was telling a story and whispered that none of it would have happened without me. I remember feeling warm with pride. I did not need him to announce my contribution to the room. I believed marriage was not a competition. I thought keeping score would make love smaller. So when Lorraine asked how Caleb had managed to create such a sophisticated risk plan, I let him answer. "I spent a lot of late nights refining it." He said. That was true. It was simply not the whole truth. I had confused privacy with loyalty. I had not yet learned that when one person repeatedly stays quiet, the other person can begin to believe the silence proves there was nothing to acknowledge. The second memory was from 2018. Rachel called me just after midnight on a Tuesday. Her marriage had ended 6 weeks earlier. Her savings were almost gone. Her former husband had stopped paying his share of the rent, and the apartment they had shared was being sold. She tried to sound composed. "I only need a few days," she said. "Maybe a week. I just need somewhere to breathe while I figure things out." "You can stay with us," I replied. There was a pause. "Are you sure?" "Yes." I had not asked Caleb first. When I told him, he stood in the kitchen with his arms folded. "How long is she staying?" "A few weeks." "You said a few days." "She is going through a divorce. So are thousands of other people." I stared at him. She is my best friend. Caleb sighed and opened the refrigerator. Fine, but I want the guest room back before your mother visits. Rachel stayed for almost 5 months. During the first week, she barely left the room. She cried in the shower because she thought the running water would hide the sound. She apologized every time she opened the refrigerator. She offered to pay rent even though she had less than $1,000 in her account. I told her to stop apologizing. One night, she sat beside me on the living room floor while we folded towels. I do not know what I would have done without you, she said. You would have figured it out? No, I mean it. You are not just my friend Naomi. You are the sister I got to choose. I believed her. I introduced her to a commercial real estate manager who needed help redesigning 2 model apartments. Rachel had always been talented, but her confidence had been destroyed by the divorce. She nearly canceled the first meeting. I cannot walk in there and pretend I have my life together, she said. You do not need to have your life together. You need a portfolio and a proposal. She looked at me. That sounds like something Caleb would say. No, I replied. Caleb would make it sound more expensive. She laughed for the first time in weeks. The project led to another, then another. Rachel rebuilt her business slowly. By the time she moved into her own apartment, she had steady clients and enough money to stop checking her bank balance before buying groceries. Caleb had been distant at first, but that changed during the months she lived with us. He started making coffee for 3 instead of 2. He watched television with her when I worked late. They developed private jokes about a home renovation show I never had time to watch. Nothing about it seemed dangerous then. Rachel was my friend. Caleb was my husband. Trust made ordinary things look harmless. I remembered coming home one evening and finding them at the kitchen island, laughing over takeout containers. Rachel looked up. We saved you some. Caleb pointed toward the stove. It might still be warm. I kissed him on the cheek and thanked them both. At the time, I felt grateful they were getting along. I never imagined I was teaching 2 people how easily they could share a life without me. By late 2024, the changes were harder to dismiss. Caleb began taking more client meetings in Vancouver and Hillsborough. Some were real. I knew that because his calendar was still visible through the shared family account. Others appeared only in conversation. He would mention a dinner after it happened, a last-minute overnight stay, a breakfast meeting that required him to leave before sunrise. His phone began resting face down on every table. That detail bothered me more than it should have. For 15 years, Caleb had left his phone anywhere. On the kitchen counter, beside the bathroom sink, under a pillow. Suddenly, he treated the screen like a door that had to remain locked. One Friday night, I asked whether he would be home for dinner. Probably not, he said. I have a client in Vancouver. Which client? He opened a cabinet without looking at me. The hospital network. I thought that account moved to another director. It did. I am helping with the transition. He closed the cabinet. Why are you interrogating me? I am asking whether I should cook for 1 person or 2. His expression softened, but only after he had made me feel unreasonable. He said, do not wait up. Rachel changed too. She stopped calling without a reason. Our conversations became shorter and strangely careful. Yet she seemed to know things about my marriage that I had never told her. The moment I could no longer dismiss happened at dinner in downtown Portland. Rachel had invited Caleb and me to celebrate a new design contract. She wore a green dress I had helped her choose years earlier and ordered Caleb's drink before he arrived. He did not seem surprised. Halfway through the meal, Caleb complained that I had answered a work email during dinner. Rachel smiled at me. You do work too much. Naomi. The words were ordinary. The tone was not. I set my glass down. What did you say? She blinked. I said, you work a lot? You know, you do. Caleb reached for the bread. She is not wrong. I looked from one of them to the other. It was the exact phrase Caleb used during our arguments. You work too much. You always choose the office. You make everything feel like a review meeting. Rachel had never heard those arguments from me, yet she repeated his conclusion as if it were common knowledge. I did not accuse them that night. I told myself I was tired, suspicious, oversensitive. For months after discovering them together, I blamed myself for not understanding sooner. I replayed every dinner, every late meeting, every time Rachel avoided my eyes. Then I finally recognized the trap in that thinking. Trusting someone was not the same as giving them permission to betray me. The failure belonged to the person who broke the trust, not the person who offered it. Michelle called me 4 days after I uploaded the records. I was sitting in my car outside my office when her name appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. Did you find something? I found several things that need more documentation, she said. I want to be precise because we are still working with incomplete records. I gripped the steering wheel. Go ahead. Over approximately 9 months, multiple transfers were made from the joint savings account. Most were small enough not to attract attention individually. How small? Anywhere from several $100s to just under $5,000. Where did the money go? Some payments went to credit cards. Some went to an account we cannot identify from the statements you provided. We will need formal discovery for the ownership records. I closed my eyes. Do you know the total? Not yet. Some of the money moved through multiple accounts. I do not want to give you an inaccurate figure. There was a pause. There is also a charge connected to a residential property in Vancouver. I opened my eyes. What kind of charge? A security deposit and administrative fee. The merchant appears to be a property management company. Last September, I remembered September. Caleb had told me he was staying at a hotel near the river for a 2-day client conference. I asked Michelle for the amount, $3,820. That is not a hotel charge. No, she said. It is consistent with an apartment deposit whose name is on the lease. I do not have the lease. The card is joint. So you have a legal right to review the charge? The rental agreement is different. Daniel will need to request that through discovery. I looked through the windshield at employees walking into the building. Caleb had used our shared card to put money down on another home. Before he told me he wanted a divorce. Before I found him with Rachel. Do not contact the property manager yourself, Michelle said. Let Daniel request the documents. I will. And Naomi, yes. Do not confront Caleb with every detail yet. We need to know what the records actually show. After the call, I sat in the car until the windows began to fog up. My phone rang again. This time it was Lorraine. I almost ignored it. Then I answered, I assume you have spoken to Caleb? She said, Good morning to you too. This is not the time for sarcasm. I leaned back against the seat. What is it the time for? For protecting what is left of this family. I looked at the phone. Caleb was worried you were making unnecessary demands. Financial discovery is not unnecessary. Lorraine lowered her voice. He made a mistake. A mistake. With Rachel, I waited. She continued, I am not defending it. But private marital problems should not destroy a man's career or reputation. I had not mentioned Caleb's work to anyone in his family. Why are you talking about his career? Because this kind of thing spreads. People talk. You have always been very focused on rules and consequences. I almost admired how quickly she had made my personality the threat. Caleb's reputation is not my responsibility, I said. You were his wife for 15 years. I still am, legally. Then act like it until this is resolved. The words landed harder than I expected. Lorraine was not asking me to forgive Caleb. She was asking me to keep protecting the image she had spent 45 years building around him. Handle this quietly, she said. Do not embarrass him more than necessary. I ended the call before I said something I would regret. My mother called that evening. Unlike Lorraine, my mother did not defend Caleb. She cried when I told her about Rachel. She called Caleb cruel and Rachel shameless. Then she asked whether I was absolutely certain about the divorce. Mom, I am not saying you should excuse him. It sounds like you are. I am saying you are 42. Starting over is hard. I stood at the kitchen counter and looked at the empty chair where Caleb used to sit. Being alone is not the worst thing that can happen to me. I know. I just worry that you are making a decision while you are hurt. I am hurt because of the decision he already made. My mother went quiet. What if he wants to try counseling? He wanted Rachel. People make terrible choices, and then other people are allowed to respond to them. She sighed. I do not want you to wake up 5 years from now and regret this. I understood her fear. My mother had spent most of her adult life believing a difficult marriage was safer than no marriage at all. She was not protecting Caleb. She was trying to protect me from a future that frightened her. But fear was still asking me to carry the cost of someone else's choices. Lorraine wanted me silent so Caleb could keep his reputation. My mother wanted me forgiving so I would not end up alone. Different motives, same request. Make this easier for him. Caleb called the next afternoon. We need to talk without attorneys, he said. About what? About how out of control this is getting. Nothing is out of control. You hired someone to dig through our finances. A forensic accountant is reviewing joint records. That is exactly what I mean. You are turning our marriage into an audit. Our marriage is ending. The finances have to be reviewed. He exhaled sharply. Meet me for dinner. Why? Because I am asking you to. I almost refused. Then I remembered Michelle telling me not to reveal everything. All right, I said. 1 hour. We met at a restaurant near the Pearl District. Caleb had already ordered wine when I arrived. I sat across from him and left the glass untouched. He looked tired, but not remorseful. Rachel is not the reason our marriage failed, he said. I had not even taken off my coat. That is how you want to begin? I am trying to make you understand. No? You are trying to make me accept your version before the records arrive. His mouth tightened. Rachel listened to me. I looked at him. So did I. Not at the end. At the end, you are lying to me. You made everything feel clinical. Every conversation became a problem to solve, and every problem somehow became my fault. He leaned closer. You are proving my point. You hired an accountant before we even had a chance to settle this privately. I studied his face. For years, I had mistaken confidence for certainty. Now I saw how often his confidence depended on nobody asking a second question. I asked one, what is the apartment in Vancouver? His expression froze, only for a fraction of a second, but I saw it. What apartment? The one connected to the $3,820 charge on our joint card. Caleb picked up his wine and took a slow sip. That was for someone on my team. Someone on your team. A temporary housing arrangement. Why would your company use our personal credit card to pay a security deposit for an employee? It was reimbursed. I did not see a reimbursement. It may have gone to another account. Which account? He set the glass down too hard. This is what I mean. You do not have a conversation. You conduct an interrogation. I kept my voice level. I asked you why our joint card paid for an apartment deposit. And I answered, no. You gave me 3 different pieces of an answer, and none of them fit together. Caleb looked toward the bar. The employee needed a place quickly. I helped. What is the employee's name? That is confidential. I almost smiled. Then Daniel can request the lease through discovery. His eyes snapped back to mine. You do not need the lease. If there is nothing unusual about it, why would that be a problem? He did not answer. The silence between us changed shape. For the first time since the separation began, Caleb was no longer directing the conversation. Every explanation created another question. Every lie needed a second lie to hold it up. He reached across the table. Naomi? Do not do this. I looked at his hand, but did not take it. Do what? Destroy 15 years, 'cause you are angry. I stood and picked up my coat. You did not answer the question. Where are you going? To ask for the records. I left him sitting beneath the soft restaurant lights with the untouched wine between us. Outside, I called Daniel. Add the Vancouver lease to the discovery request, I said. Include any related account. Reimbursement. Transfer record. And communication connected to the deposits. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Did Caleb explain it? He tried, and his explanation changed before dinner was over. Daniel exhaled. I will update the request. I looked back through the restaurant window. Caleb was staring at his phone now, typing quickly to someone. For years, I had protected him by accepting incomplete answers. That night, I stopped doing it. 3 weeks later, Daniel called me into his office. Michelle was already there, seated beside a stack of neatly organized records. She had divided the documents into 3 folders, each one marked with a different date range. Daniel closed the door after I entered. We received the first production from Caleb's attorney. I sat across from them. Did he disclose the apartment? Daniel glanced at Michelle. He disclosed enough for us to find what he hoped we would overlook. Michelle opened the first folder. Over 9 months, $68,500 had left our shared assets. The money had not disappeared in one dramatic transfer. Caleb had moved it slowly, in amounts small enough to look ordinary if no one compared them. There were furniture purchases, a security deposit, car rental fees, payments to a private account connected to Rachel. Several transfers were labeled as personal loans, but Michelle found no promissory notes, repayment schedules, or evidence that Rachel had ever returned the money. I stared at the figures. How much went directly to her? Just over $20,000, Michelle said. The rest supported expenses connected to the apartment and travel. Daniel leaned forward. We are not calling it theft. Not at this stage. But these expenditures may be treated as a misuse of marital assets during the divorce. I nodded, though I barely heard him. Caleb had not simply fallen in love with someone else. He had financed their new life with money that belonged to both of us. Michelle opened the second folder. This is the lease. The apartment was in Vancouver, Washington, not far from the river. Caleb was listed as the primary tenant. Rachel was identified as an additional occupant. Her name was not on the financial obligation. The signature date stopped me. Caleb had signed the lease nearly 4 months before he told me he wanted a divorce. I ran my finger beneath the date as if touching it could make it less real. He planned this before I found them. Daniel spoke gently. That appears to be what the records indicate. He was still sleeping beside me. Neither of them answered. I remembered Caleb bringing home flowers one evening during that same month. He had apologized for being distant. He had said work was exhausting him. While I put the flowers in water, he already had another home waiting. Michelle turned the lease toward me. There is something else. Rachel is allowed to live there, but she has no ownership interest and no independent right to renew the lease. I looked up. She thinks they chose that apartment together. We cannot know what she thinks, Daniel said. We only know what the document says. That distinction mattered. Evidence did not need anger added to it. It did not need my interpretation. When recorded properly, it could speak in a voice louder than anything I might say. Daniel closed the folders. We will request complete records for the transfers and the account receiving the funds. I felt tired rather than victorious. For months, I had wondered whether Caleb's betrayal had been impulsive, a collapse of judgment, a reckless affair that grew beyond his control. The lease answered that question. It had been planned. 2 days later, the third piece of evidence found me at work. I was leaving a conference room at Harborside Technologies when Lucas Grant approached me. He was a senior systems architect, quiet and precise, the kind of person who rarely raised a concern unless he had already checked it twice. Naomi, do you have a minute? His expression made me stop. Is this about a compliance matter? I think it may be. I led him into a small meeting room and left the door partly open. Lucas placed a notebook on the table, but did not sit. About 6 weeks ago, I sent Caleb a restricted presentation for an internal strategy meeting. What was in it? Deployment architecture, pricing assumptions, and a risk model for a new enterprise product. No customer data, but it was not approved for external distribution. I kept my face neutral. Why did you send it to him? He was presenting to senior leadership. He needed the technical section. Lucas hesitated. Last week, someone from Summit Ridge Consulting spoke during a partner call. He used phrases from my presentation, not common industry language. My wording. Do you have evidence Caleb sent it? No. That is why I came to you instead of accusing him. I felt the conflict before Lucas finished speaking. Caleb was still legally my husband. We were in an adversarial divorce. I worked in corporate compliance. If I touched the investigation myself, every legitimate finding could be questioned. Do not send me the file, I said. Lucas looked surprised. I already have access to the system. I know, but I cannot review Caleb's activity. I have a conflict. What should I do? Preserve whatever you already have. Do not search his email or device. I will report the allegation through the ethics channel and remove myself from the case. Lucas sat down then. Are you sure you want to report your own husband? I am sure I do not get to ignore a security concern because of who he is. That afternoon, I submitted the report through the company ethics hotline. I included only what Lucas had told me directly. I did not mention the divorce records. Rachel, or Caleb's unexplained travel, those facts belong to another process. Then I called Marcus Reed, the vice president of corporate security. I filed a report involving Caleb, I said. Marcus was silent for a moment. You understand the conflict. Yes, I need to be excluded from intake, review, and any decision. I agree. His answer was professional, not comforting. I also need a written statement from you, facts only, no conclusions. No information from the divorce unless legal determines it is relevant and lawfully obtainable. Understood. And Naomi, I need to be clear. We will not assume Lucas is right because you filed the report. I would not ask you to. We will also examine whether personal conflict influenced the allegation. The words stung, even though they were fair. I expected that. Marcus assigned the technical review to Annika Patel, the director of digital forensics. She would collect access logs, download histories, and company email records under Harborside's internal procedures. I signed an acknowledgement confirming that I would not access the case file. The next morning, Caleb received a preservation notice and a request to surrender his company laptop for imaging. He called me within minutes. "What did you do?" I stepped into an empty stairwell. "What are you talking about?" "Security took my laptop. They told me not to delete anything. If you received a preservation notice, follow it. You reported me. I reported a security concern. This is revenge." My hand tightened around the phone. "I am not investigating you. I am not reviewing your records. I will not make any decision about what happens. You took our private problems into the company. Lucas brought a work concern to compliance." Caleb stopped breathing for a second. He had not asked who raised the concern. He already knew what it involved. "Work is work," he said. "Our marriage is separate. You stopped keeping them separate when you used our money to build another life. That has nothing to do with company data. Then the investigation will confirm that." His voice lowered. "You have no idea what you are doing." "I know exactly what I am not doing. I am not protecting you from questions anymore." He ended the call. Later that week, Rachel called Caleb while he was at the apartment. I learned what happened afterward through messages eventually produced in Discovery, but I could picture the conversation clearly. Rachel had seen an email notification from Summit Ridge, consulting on Caleb's personal tablet. The recruiter mentioned a leadership role in San Francisco, not Vancouver. Not even the same state. "You said we were staying here," she told him. "The opportunity is not final. Were you planning to move to San Francisco?" "I was going to tell you when I knew more." "When?" After the divorce was resolved, Rachel looked around the apartment she had helped furnish. "Is this place temporary?" "Everything is temporary until the settlement is done." "My name is not even on the lease." "You are listed as an occupant." "That is not the same thing." Caleb grew impatient. "Why are you creating a problem now?" Rachel had probably heard him ask me that same question 100 times. For the first time, he was asking it of her. At Harborside, Annika completed the preliminary review within 10 days. The log showed that Caleb's account had downloaded Lucas's restricted presentation late at night. Less than an hour later, a company email had sent an attachment with the same file size to an external address. The address belonged to a recruiter working with Summit Ridge. Marcus asked me to come to his office. Annika was present, along with an attorney from the legal department. A document lay on the table between them. Marcus spoke carefully. "The preliminary evidence supports further investigation into unauthorized use and external transfer of restricted company material." I said nothing. "This is no longer an informal assessment," he continued. "We are opening a formal internal investigation." He slid the document toward me. It confirmed my recusal from all interviews, findings, disciplinary discussions, and access to the investigative file. I signed my name. The decision no longer belonged to me. Neither did Caleb's version of the truth. From that moment forward, the company would rely on what its systems had recorded, not on what either of us wanted people to believe. I learned about Caleb's suspension from Marcus, not from the investigation file. He called me into his office late on a Tuesday afternoon. Annika was there, along with a representative from Human Resources. A closed folder sat on the table, but no one pushed it toward me. Marcus waited until the door shut. The forensic review is complete enough for us to take interim action. I sat across from him. What does that mean for me? For you? Very little. Your recusal remains in place. He paused. For Caleb? It means his system access has been suspended while legal and human resources review the findings. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Was the transfer confirmed? Marcus chose his words carefully. The logs show that restricted product strategy materials, pricing assumptions, and implementation risk documents were downloaded through Caleb's account. Portions of those materials were later sent to an external recruiter. I felt something cold settle beneath my ribs. Was there customer data? No customer data. No source code. The human resources representative leaned forward. That does not make the transfer acceptable. The material was confidential and used outside its authorized purpose, Marcus continued. Lucas also confirmed that Caleb was not the primary author of the technical analysis he used during the recruiting process. I looked toward the closed folder. He presented Lucas's work as his own. We are still allowing Caleb to respond, Marcus said. No final decision has been made. I nodded. That distinction mattered. Even when every instinct in me wanted certainty, what am I permitted to know? Only what affects your obligations as an employee. You are not part of the interview's recommendations or disciplinary decision. I understand. Marcus studied me for a moment. Do not discuss this with Caleb. I have not. If he contacts you about the investigation, document the contact and refer him to his attorney or human resources. I left the office with no satisfaction. The company had found evidence supporting what Lucas feared, but I still felt as if I were standing near the edge of something collapsing. Caleb had spent years making his career part of our shared identity. Every promotion had shaped where we lived, who we knew, and how his family measured his worth. Now he was losing control of the one story he had always told best. He came to the townhome that evening. I saw his car pull into the driveway just after 7. He no longer had a key, so he knocked 3 times, waited, then knocked again. When I opened the door, he looked less polished than usual. His shirt collar was open, and he had not shaved. We need to talk. You should speak with your attorney. This is not about the divorce. I almost laughed. With you. Everything is about the divorce when it helps you, and completely separate when it does not. His eyes hardened. Let me inside. No. Naomi, we can talk here. The porch light cast deep shadows beneath his eyes. Rain gathered on the shoulders of his coat. He glanced toward the neighboring homes. You want everyone to hear you are the one who came without calling? He lowered his voice. Tell Marcus the file was misunderstood. I cannot tell him something I do not know. You know exactly what happened. No. Annika knows what the systems recorded. I am not allowed to review it. Caleb stepped closer. The material was an example. I was showing a recruiter the scope of my work. There was no client information, no code, nothing that could hurt the company. You sent restricted material outside the company. It was a few slides. That does not make it yours. His face tightened. You are enjoying this. The accusation struck me harder than I expected. I looked at the man I'd once waited up for after late flights. The man whose ties I had chosen before interviews. The man I had defended when his family called him difficult. Because I believed ambition could look like arrogance when someone was under pressure. I had loved him. That did not mean I could keep rescuing him. I am not enjoying any of this. Then help me. I cannot stop the investigation. You can tell them this came from a personal conflict. You can say Lucas misunderstood. You can say I had authorization. Did you? He looked away. That was the answer. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. If I lose my job, it affects both of us. The settlement, retirement accounts, everything. There it was again. Not remorse, leverage. You are asking me to make a false statement because the truth may cost you money. I am asking you to protect 15 years of our life. Our life did not send those files. His jaw clenched. You think you are untouchable because the house is in your name. The house has nothing to do with your work investigation. It has everything to do with this. You are trying to leave me with nothing. I remained in the doorway. The townhome was purchased with my inheritance. The title is in my name. The mortgage came from my separate account. I contributed to this marriage. Yes, you did. He seemed surprised by the answer. And if marital funds paid for improvements or created a valid reimbursement claim, the court can consider that. His expression changed. But you do not automatically own half of the house because you lived here. I will fight for it. That is your right. I will also tell the company you used compliance to destroy me. The company documented my recusal before the review began. You think paperwork protects you from everything? No. It protects the process from both of us. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, read the screen, and went completely still. What happened? I asked. He did not answer. The color drained from his face. I could see only the first line of the email before he turned the screen away. Summit Ridge Consulting. Caleb read the message twice. Then he looked at me as if I had written it. They withdrew the offer. I said nothing. They said I failed to disclose an active investigation. His voice rose. They said the materials I used during the interview could not be verified as my work. The rain grew heavier around us. You told them, he asked. No. Someone did? Then ask them. He stared at me. You knew this would happen. I knew questions would be asked. He shoved the phone back into his pocket. You have taken everything. I shook my head. I did not send the documents. I did not claim Lucas's analysis. I did not hide an investigation from a recruiter. You reported me. I reported a concern. The evidence did the rest. For the first time, Caleb looked frightened. Not angry. Not offended. Frightened. He had always believed he could control consequences by controlling the story. But now the stories were colliding. The husband who said his marriage was dead had used marital money to build a secret home. The executive who called himself a strategic leader had used another man's work to prove his value. The lover who promised Rachel a future had been preparing one she knew nothing about. Rachel discovered that part the next morning. The property management company sent her an email about a request to terminate the Vancouver lease early because she was listed as an occupant. They needed to schedule a move-out inspection. She called Caleb before she finished reading it. What did you do? Caleb was driving when he answered. I cannot talk right now. Did you cancel the lease? It is complicated. No. The email says you requested early termination. Where are we supposed to live? We are not doing this over the phone. Are you moving to San Francisco? There was a pause. The job offer is no longer available. That was not my question. Rachel, were you looking for a place there? I was exploring options for yourself. I did not know what you wanted. She laughed once, without humor. You never asked. The divorce is not final. I could not make promises. You let me choose the furniture. I paid for the furniture with Naomi's money. Caleb's silence confirmed more than an explanation could have. Rachel lowered her voice. My name is not on the lease because you never planned to stay with me. That is not true. Then why was I only listed as an occupant? Because my credit was stronger. You said it was our home. It was temporary until the settlement. Everything with me was temporary. Caleb grew impatient. You knew I was married when this started. Do not act innocent now. The words landed exactly where he intended. Rachel had made a choice, a selfish one. She had entered a marriage that was still legally and emotionally unfinished because she wanted to believe Caleb's version of me. But hearing him use her own wrongdoing to silence her forced her to recognize the pattern. He had done the same thing to me. Whenever I questioned him, he found a flaw in me large enough to avoid answering. Rachel left the apartment 2 days later. She called me the following week and asked to meet. I almost said no. Then Daniel told me her attorney had contacted him about providing documents related to the marital funds. She is offering records voluntarily, he said. Invoices, payment messages, and communications with Caleb. Why now? You would have to ask her. We met at a quiet coffee shop in Portland on a gray Saturday morning. Rachel was already seated when I arrived. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but in the way people do when certainty has left them. I sat across from her. She wrapped both hands around her cup. Thank you for coming. I came because Daniel said you had records. I do. She opened a folder but did not push it toward me. My attorney will send everything directly to Daniel. I am not asking you to take it. That is probably best. Rachel nodded. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said the words I had imagined hearing for months. I am sorry. The apology did not bring relief. It made me tired. What exactly are you sorry for? Her eyes filled. For all of it? That is not specific? She looked down. For sleeping with your husband, for living in your house while lying to you, for taking money that belonged to both of you, for letting myself believe I was not responsible because Caleb told me your marriage was already over. My throat tightened. What did he tell you about me? Rachel wiped beneath one eye. He said you were cold. He said you controlled everything. He said you cared more about work than him. He said every conversation felt like an audit. The same words. The same story. Caleb had handed her the version of me that made betrayal feel compassionate. And you believed him. I wanted to. Her honesty hurt more than an excuse would have. He told me you had been living like roommates for years. He said you were waiting for the right financial moment to leave him. I was helping him prepare presentations while he told you I did not support him. Rachel looked away. I know that now. No, you knew who I was before any of this. You slept in my guest room. I found you clients. You called me your sister. Her face crumpled. I know. You did not betray a stranger because a married man lied to you. You betrayed someone who had already shown you what kind of person she was. I have no defense. Good. Because being lied to does not erase what you chose. She nodded slowly. I wanted to hate her. For months. Hatred had seemed cleaner than grief. But sitting across from Rachel, I saw someone who had harmed me and had also discovered that the story she used to justify it had never made her safe. That did not make her innocent. It only made the damage wider. There is something else, she said. She took out her phone but kept it in her hand. I saw messages from the recruiter. Caleb was looking at apartments in San Francisco for one person. He never told me. You should give that to your attorney. I already did. She will provide anything relevant to Daniel. And the company, my attorney contacted corporate security. They asked for the original messages and email headers. I gave them access to what Caleb had shown me voluntarily. They said they would verify everything independently. I nodded. That was how it had to be. Rachel searched my face. Do you think you will ever forgive me? The question felt unfair, even if she did not intend it that way. I do not know. She lowered her eyes. I understand. No, I do not think you do. Forgiveness is not something you get because you finally told the truth after the lie stopped benefiting you. She flinched. I am not asking to be your friend again. Then do not ask me to make you feel better. We sat in silence until her coffee went cold. I left without embracing her. That afternoon, Marcus called. He did not reveal the details of Rachel's submission, only that corporate security had received additional information and independently confirmed its connection to the recruiting process. Caleb had been called into a formal disciplinary meeting. The preliminary findings supported serious violations of confidentiality and professional conduct. His suspension would continue with pay for a short period while the final employment decision was reviewed. Am I required to do anything? I asked. No. Continue your recusal. I thanked him and ended the call. Caleb came to the town home again that evening. This time, he did not look angry when I opened the door. He looked defeated. Rachel left. I held the door partly closed. I know. She gave them messages. That was her decision. She gave Daniel the invoices too. That was also her decision. He stared past me into the home where we had once spent Christmas mornings and Sunday afternoons. I lost the job in San Francisco. I know I may lose Harborside. I know. His eyes returned to mine. Are you happy now? The question carried 15 years of entitlement. It assumed my pain had always been about wanting him punished. No, he looked almost disappointed. I do not feel happy. Then what do you feel? I thought about the unsigned settlement, the hidden apartment, the money, Lucas's presentation, and Rachel repeating every cruel thing Caleb had said about me. I feel finished standing between you and the consequences of your choices. He swallowed. You could still help me. No, Naomi. I cannot change the records. I cannot withdraw another employee's concern. I cannot force Rachel to take back documents. I cannot make Summit Ridge restore an offer you lost because of your own conduct. His voice broke. What am I supposed to do? For years, that question would have sent me into action. I would have found a solution, made a call, rewritten the explanation, helped him appear more prepared than he was. This time, I did nothing. You need to speak with your attorneys. He stood there for another moment, waiting for the woman I had always been to return. She did not. Caleb stepped back from the doorway. I closed the door and turned the lock. Then I rested my hand against the wood and listened until his footsteps disappeared into the rain. I did not feel victorious. I only felt the weight of no longer holding him up. 4 months after the first settlement meeting, I returned to Daniel's office for final mediation. The rain had finally stopped, but the sky over Portland remained pale and heavy. I sat beside Daniel with a glass of water I had not touched. Across the table, Caleb looked thinner than he had in January. His suit still fit, but the confidence that once filled every room around him was gone. His attorney placed a calculator beside a stack of documents. Michelle's final report rested in front of Daniel. $68,500 had been removed from our shared assets over 9 months. The report did not describe every dollar as stolen. Michelle had been careful about that. She separated the transactions into categories supported by the records. There were transfers to Rachel. furniture and rental expenses connected to the Vancouver apartment, vehicle charges, payments labeled as loans that had no written agreements or repayment history. Daniel explained that we were requesting an adjustment to the property division because the money had not served the marriage. Caleb's attorney looked at him. "The documentation is difficult to dispute," he said. Caleb leaned back. "I did not hide every transaction." Daniel remained calm. "No one said you did. The issue is whether marital assets were used for purposes outside the marriage without Naomi's knowledge." Caleb looked at me. "You knew we were having problems. Problems were not permission to finance another household." I replied, "The mediator asked us to focus on settlement terms. The largest dispute remained the townhome. I had purchased the Lake Oswego property in 2012 with money inherited from my grandmother. The title had remained in my name. Mortgage payments had come from an account that I kept separate throughout the marriage. That did not automatically end every question. Several years earlier, we had used a small amount from a joint account to renovate the kitchen and replace damaged flooring. Caleb had a legitimate claim for part of that contribution. Daniel had warned me not to confuse fairness with total victory. The house was mainly my separate property. He explained before mediation, but if marital money increased its value, Caleb may be entitled to a reasonable reimbursement. I had agreed. I did not want to take everything from Caleb. I wanted him to stop turning exaggeration into ownership. His attorney reviewed the property analysis. Caleb will receive reimbursement for the documented marital contribution to the improvements, he said. But the current records do not support a 50% ownership claim. Caleb stared at the table. For months, he had threatened to take half the home. Now the threat had been reduced to a number supported by receipts. The retirement funds earned during the marriage were divided under the settlement. Several investment accounts were also divided. Caleb kept his personal vehicle and a portion of the marital savings, reduced by the agreed adjustment for the $68,500. Some of the money would be repaid directly. The rest would be deducted from what he received. Caleb rubbed his forehead. "This makes me look like I am walking away with nothing." His attorney spoke quietly. "You are not walking away with nothing. You are receiving your share of the marital assets after the adjustments." Caleb looked at me. "You could agree to less." I held his gaze. "So could you?" The mediator gave us separate rooms for nearly an hour. When Daniel returned, he closed the door behind him. "Caleb's attorney has explained the risks of continuing," he said. "A trial would increase legal costs. An expanded discovery could expose more financial records. They are prepared to sign." I looked at the settlement pages. 15 years had been reduced to account balances, dates, and signatures. I had once imagined the end of my marriage would feel dramatic. I thought there would be a final sentence that made everything clear. Instead, I felt sadness, not because I wanted Caleb back, because part of me still remembered the young man who kissed my forehead over a presentation at 2 a.m. and asked what he would do without me. The answer had arrived slowly. He would keep taking until I stopped offering. I signed the agreement. Caleb signed several minutes later. The employment decision came through a separate process. Marcus contacted me after the company closed the investigation. He did not discuss the disciplinary meeting or the internal debate. He only confirmed the outcome I was permitted to know. Harborside Technologies had concluded that Caleb violated confidentiality policy, used restricted internal material outside its approved purpose, and represented work created by others as evidence of his own expertise. The investigation found no sale of company data. There was no customer information involved, and no evidence supporting criminal charges. Caleb's employment was terminated for serious policy violations. I had no role in the decision. I had not attended the final interviews. I had not reviewed the recommendation. I received the same formal notice that would have been given to any compliance employee whose recusal involved an active matter. Caleb had not lost the ability to work forever. He still had experience. He still had industry knowledge. He could rebuild somewhere else, though probably at a lower level and without the reputation he had spent years polishing. What he lost was the illusion that his image could survive any choice he made. Lorraine called me the evening after the decision became official. I answered because I wanted the conversation to end clearly. She did not greet me. Caleb lost his job, she said. I know. You could have prevented this. No. You worked in compliance. You knew how to make them understand that it was a mistake. He did not lose his job because he had an affair. Do not pretend this is unrelated. It is related only because Caleb made choices in both places. The company investigated what he did at work. They made their own decision. Lorraine's voice became sharper. A good wife does not stand by while her husband loses his career over one mistake. A good husband does not ask his wife to lie so he can escape the consequences of several decisions. There was a long silence. Then she said I had always been difficult. I almost defended myself. Instead, I let the accusation remain where it belonged. Lorraine, you may disagree with me. You may blame me. But you may not continue calling to pressure me into rescuing Caleb. He needs help. Then he should ask his attorney, a career counselor, or a therapist. He should not ask me. We are still family until the divorce is final. No, I am no longer available for this role. She did not apologize. She simply stopped speaking. For years. Silence from Caleb's family had made me anxious. I would rush to fill it, explain myself, and restore the peace. That evening, I waited. Eventually, Lorraine ended the call. My mother came to the townhome the following Sunday. She brought groceries, even though I had told her not to. It was her way of entering difficult conversations with something useful in her hands. We unpacked the bags together. When everything was put away, she sat at the kitchen table. I owe you an apology, she said. I waited. Not the kind where I say, I am sorry you were hurt. That is a good start. She looked down at her hands. When I told you to consider staying, I was thinking about my fear. I was afraid you would be alone. I made that fear more important than your dignity. The honesty in her words softened something in me. She continued. I would never tell myself to accept what Caleb did. I would never tell a friend to accept it. But I asked you to because I was frightened. I sat across from her. You made me feel like leaving a dishonest marriage was more dangerous than remaining in one. I know. She looked at me. I was wrong. My mother did not say the divorce was a blessing. She did not try to convince me everything happened for a reason. She simply accepted responsibility. That made her apology possible to receive. I forgive you, I said, but I need more than one conversation. She nodded. What does that mean? It means when I set a boundary, I need you to respect it. Even when you are scared, even when you think you know what is best for me, I can do that. We will see, I said gently. She almost smiled. That was the beginning of repairing our relationship, not the end of the work. Rachel sent me a letter 2 weeks before the divorce became final. It arrived through Daniel's office because she did not want to come to the townhome uninvited. I left the envelope unopened for 3 days. When I finally read it, Rachel did not claim Caleb had deceived her into becoming someone she was not. She admitted he had lied. She also admitted she had wanted the lies to be true. She wrote that believing I was cold and controlling allowed her to take what she wanted without seeing herself as someone who had betrayed the woman who gave her a home. She acknowledged the money, the apartment, and the way she had repeated Caleb's private criticisms as if they excused her choices. She had moved to Eugene, reduced the number of design projects she accepted, and begun therapy. She did not ask me to restore our friendship. She only said she was sorry and that she understood if I never answered. I folded the letter and returned it to the envelope. For a long time, I believed releasing my anger would mean letting Rachel escape responsibility. It did not. I could stop carrying hatred without reopening the door. I never wrote back. The final court appearance lasted less than an hour. The judge reviewed the settlement, confirmed that we both understood the terms, and entered the dissolution. When it was over, Caleb and I stepped into the courthouse hallway together. Daniel walked ahead to give us space. Caleb held the folder containing his copy of the agreement. He looked older, not ruined, not helpless, just stripped of the certainty that someone else would always fix the damage. He stopped beside a row of windows. "Do you feel better now?" he asked. I looked at him. "About what?" "You kept the house. Rachel left. I lost my job. You never owned half the house. Rachel chose to leave. Harborside made its own decision." He gave a bitter laugh. "You make it sound like you had nothing to do with any of it." I reported what I was required to report. I asked for financial records I had a right to review. After that, the evidence and the people responsible for each process made the decisions. "You knew what would happen." "No, I knew what might happen if I stopped protecting you." His eyes moved toward the courthouse doors. "Did you ever love me?" The question hurt because the answer was still true. "Yes." He looked back at me. "Then how could you let all of this happen?" "Because loving you became the reason I was expected to ignore the truth." He said nothing. I continued. "I loved you enough to carry more than my share for years. I helped your career. I defended you to your family. I accepted incomplete answers because I thought trust meant not asking difficult questions." My voice remained steady, but my chest ached. Love cannot survive when one person must sacrifice reality, so the other person never has to be accountable. Caleb looked at me as if he were searching for another argument. There was none left. I did not create the consequences he faced. I had only stopped repairing them before they could reach him. Daniel called my name from the end of the hallway. Caleb turned toward the opposite exit. For a moment, we stood between two directions. Then we walked away from each other. 3 months later, I was still working at Harborside Technologies. My career did not transform overnight because my personal life had fallen apart. I did not receive a dramatic promotion or a new office. I continued doing the work I had always done well. Marcus asked me to help design a company training program on conflicts of interest, reporting obligations, and evidence preservation. We used fictional examples and past public cases. Caleb's investigation was never mentioned. At home, I repainted the walls in warm white and replaced the heavy furniture Caleb had chosen. The guest room was harder for months. I kept the door closed because every object reminded me of Rachel. The closet where she once hung her clothes. The window beside which she rebuilt her client portfolio. The floor where we had folded towels while she called me her chosen sister. One Saturday, I emptied the room. I donated the bed and moved in a desk, 2 bookshelves, and a wide chair beside the window, it became a place to read, work, and think, not a memorial to betrayal. Not a room waiting for someone else to need me. A room for me. I also joined a weekend kayaking class on the Willamette River. I had wanted to try it for years. Caleb disliked cold water, early mornings, and activities he could not master immediately, so I had always postponed it. During my first class, I nearly tipped the kayak before leaving the dock. I laughed so hard that the instructor had to steady the boat. By the fourth weekend, I could move across the water without fighting every current. One quiet afternoon, Daniel mailed me the certified copy of the final divorce judgment. I carried it into my office and opened the envelope. There was no rush of triumph, no desire to frame it. I placed it in the bottom drawer beneath tax records and insurance documents. Then I closed the drawer. What I had recovered was larger than a home, a bank account, or a legal victory. I had recovered the right to trust my own perception. I no longer had to question my value whenever someone needed me to remain silent. I no longer believed being generous required me to live without boundaries. I had loved Caleb. I had loved Rachel. Their betrayal had changed my life, but it did not get to define the rest of it. The future was not the life I had planned. For the first time in years, it was a life I was free to choose. If you were in my place, could you forgive Rachel without allowing her back into your life? And would you have stopped protecting Caleb sooner? Share your thoughts in the comments. And stay with the channel for more stories about betrayal, consequences, and women who finally choose themselves.